What happens when one of Hollywood's most beloved actors gets pushed to his absolute breaking point on live television? Well, you're about to find out because Hugh Jackman, the man who brought Wolverine to life for over 2 decades, completely lost it on The View in what can only be described as one of the most explosive moments in daytime television history. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think about celebrity interviews gone wrong. It was supposed to be a routine promotional appearance. Hugh Jackman had just wrapped up his latest Broadway run and was making the rounds on talk shows to discuss his upcoming projects. The View seemed like the perfect platform, a friendly environment where he could chat about his career, his philanthropy work, and maybe share some behind-the-scenes stories from his time as the iconic X-Men character. What nobody expected was for Whoopi Goldberg to turn what should have been a pleasant conversation into a full-blown interrogation. The trouble started almost immediately after Hugh settled into his chair. The other hosts, Joy Behar, Sarah Haynes, and Alyssa Farah Griffin, were their usual welcoming selves. But Whoopi had a different energy from the moment the cameras started rolling. She barely acknowledged Hugh's presence during the initial pleasantries. And when she did speak, there was an unmistakable edge to her voice. "So, Hugh," Whoopi began, leaning forward with her arms crossed, "I have to ask you about something that's been bothering me. You've been playing this Wolverine character for what, 20 years? And in all that time, you've been part of a franchise that has consistently failed to represent people who look like me. How do you reconcile that with your supposed commitment to diversity?" The question caught everyone off guard. Hugh, who had been expecting to talk about his recent charity work with his Laughing Man Coffee Foundation, blinked in surprise. The other hosts exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly not expecting Whoopi to come out swinging so aggressively. "Well, Whoopi," he replied, maintaining his characteristic composure, "I think the X-Men films have actually been quite progressive in many ways. The entire premise of the franchise is about acceptance, about people who are different finding their place in the world. And if you look at the cast over the years, we've had incredible actors from all backgrounds. Halle Berry's Storm was one of the most powerful characters in the entire series." Whoopi wasn't having it. She waved her hand dismissively and shook her head. "One character, Hugh. One character in how many films? And let's be honest, Storm was hardly given the development she deserved. She was there to check a box, nothing more." The tension in the studio was palpable. Hugh's jaw tightened slightly, but he continued to respond professionally. "I respectfully disagree, Whoopi. Halle brought incredible depth to that role, and the character of Storm was essential to the storytelling. But beyond that, I wasn't in charge of casting decisions. I was an actor hired to play a specific role." "Oh, so you're saying you had no influence?" Whoopi pressed, her voice rising. "You, one of the biggest stars in the franchise, had no say in who got hired. That's convenient." Hugh's famous smile was beginning to strain. "What I'm saying is that I always advocated for the best possible cast, regardless of background, and I'm proud of the work we did. The X-Men universe has touched millions of people around the world with its message of acceptance and understanding." "Touched millions of white people, you mean?" Whoopi shot back, causing an audible gasp from someone in the audience. Let's not pretend this franchise was some beacon of diversity. It was a white fantasy dressed up in superhero costumes. The other hosts tried to jump in. Joy Behar attempted to steer the conversation toward Hugh's Broadway work, but Whoopi cut her off with a sharp look. Sarah Haynes looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. Alyssa Farah Griffin was frantically shuffling through her notes, probably looking for a way to change the subject. Hugh, meanwhile, was struggling to maintain his composure. His hands, which had been resting casually on the arms of his chair, were now gripping them tightly. "Whoopi, I understand you feel strongly about representation in Hollywood, and those are important conversations to have. But to dismiss the entire franchise and the hard work of everyone involved, that's not fair." "Fair?" Whoopi laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to talk about fair? Let's talk about how fair it was for young black children to grow up watching these movies and seeing themselves reflected in what? One character who spent half her screen time with white hair and blue eyes. Let's talk about how fair it was for you to collect those massive paychecks while the industry continued to exclude voices that looked like mine." Hugh's face was turning red now. The famously patient actor was clearly reaching his limit. "You know what, Whoopi? I'm proud of the work I did in those films. I'm proud of the messages they conveyed about acceptance and tolerance. And I'm proud to have worked alongside talented actors from all backgrounds. If you want to criticize the industry as a whole, that's a conversation worth having. But don't sit there and attack me personally for doing my job and doing it well. The audience was dead silent. Even the camera operator seemed frozen in place. This was not the Hugh Jackman that people were used to seeing. This was a man who had been pushed too far, and everyone in the studio could sense that something was about to explode. Whoopi, however, seemed to be enjoying herself. She leaned back in her chair with a satisfied smirk. I'm not attacking you personally, Hugh. I'm attacking the system that you were happy to benefit from. There's a difference, is there? Hugh asked, his voice now carrying a dangerous edge. Because it sure sounds like you're making this about me specifically. You invited me here to talk about my current projects, my charity work, my life. Instead, you're using this platform to grandstand and make me the villain in some narrative you've constructed. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Everyone in the studio knew they were witnessing something unprecedented. Hugh Jackman, the man who had charmed audiences for decades with his warmth and professionalism, was about to reach his breaking point on live television. Whoopi's smirk only grew wider as she sensed Hugh's growing frustration. She had him exactly where she wanted him, and she wasn't about to let up. Oh, so now I'm grandstanding. That's rich coming from someone who spent 20 years playing the same character over and over again. Tell me, Hugh, what's it like to have such limited range as an actor? The other hosts looked horrified. Joy Behar's mouth fell open in shock. This had gone from a discussion about representation to a personal attack on Hugh's acting abilities. Sarah Haynes actually put her hand to her forehead in disbelief. Even Alyssa Farah Griffin, who was usually quick with a diplomatic response, seemed speechless. Hugh's eyes flashed with anger. Limited range? I've done Broadway musicals, dramas, comedies. I've been nominated for Tony Awards, Emmy Awards, Golden Globes. But you know what? I don't need to justify my career to you, Whoopi. What I do need to understand is why you're being so hostile to a guest on your show. Hostile? Whoopi laughed again. That same cold, mirthless sound. I'm being honest. Something this industry could use more of. You come on here with your perfect smile and your rehearsed answers, expecting everyone to just fawn over you. Well, I'm not going to do that. I didn't expect you to fawn over me, he replied, his voice getting louder. I expected basic professional courtesy, something you clearly don't understand. The audience was completely silent now. You could hear a pin drop in that studio. The camera operators were probably getting the shots of their careers, capturing every moment of this unprecedented meltdown. The producers in the control room were likely having panic attacks, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let this train wreck continue. Whoopi stood up from her chair, towering over Hugh. Professional courtesy? You want to talk about professional courtesy? How about the courtesy of acknowledging that you benefited from a system that kept people like me out of roles? How about the courtesy of using your platform to actually make a difference instead of just collecting paychecks? Hugh shot up from his chair as well, matching her energy. I have used my platform. I've raised millions for charity. I've supported countless causes. I've mentored young actors from all backgrounds, but apparently none of that matters to you because I played a character in a superhero movie. Oh, here we go, Whoopi said, rolling her eyes dramatically. The white savior complex in full display. You think throwing money at problems makes up for being part of the problem? White savior complex? Hugh's voice cracked with disbelief. Are you serious right now? I'm from Australia, Whoopi. I came to this country with nothing but a dream and worked my way up. I didn't have any advantages handed to me. You had the biggest advantage of all, Whoopi shot back. You had the right skin color. You had the right look. You fit the mold that Hollywood wanted. And you rode that wave for decades. Hugh's hands were shaking now. You don't know anything about my journey. You don't know the rejection I faced, the years of struggling, the sacrifices I made. You're reducing my entire career to the color of my skin. And that's not just wrong, it's disgusting. The word disgusting seemed to hit Whoopi like a physical blow. Her eyes narrowed dangerously. Did you just call me disgusting? I called your attitude disgusting, Hugh clarified, but his voice was trembling with rage. Your need to tear down someone else to make your point. Your complete lack of professionalism on your own show. Joy Behar finally found her voice. Maybe we should take a commercial break, she suggested weakly, but both Hugh and Whoopi ignored her completely. My lack of professionalism? Whoopi's voice was rising to match Hugh's. I'm the one asking the hard questions that need to be asked. I'm the one holding you accountable for your choices. Accountable for what? Hugh exploded. For being successful, for working hard, for playing a character that millions of people loved. What exactly am I supposed to be accountable for, Whoopi? For perpetuating a system that excludes people like me, Whoopi shouted back. For taking roles that could have gone to more diverse actors. For being part of the problem instead of the solution. Hugh laughed bitterly. So, I should have turned down work. I should have said no to opportunities because of my skin color. Do you hear yourself right now? You're literally advocating for discrimination. I'm advocating for equity, Whoopi retorted. Something you clearly don't understand because you've never had to fight for anything in your life. Never had to fight? Hugh's voice was incredulous. I've been working since I was 16 years old. I've been rejected more times than I can count. I've struggled with self-doubt, with criticism, with the pressure of living up to expectations. But sure, let's pretend it was all handed to me on a silver platter. Sarah Haynes made another attempt to intervene. Hugh, Whoopi, maybe we can find some common ground here, she said desperately. But her voice was drowned out by the arguing. Whoopi wasn't backing down. Oh, poor Hugh Jackman. Life was so hard for the handsome white actor who got to play one of the most iconic characters in comic book history. My heart bleeds for you. The sarcasm in her voice was cutting, and Hugh visibly flinched. You know what? I'm done with this. I came here to have a conversation, not to be ambushed by someone who clearly has their own agenda. My agenda? Whoopi laughed harshly. My agenda is truth, Hugh. Something you seem allergic to. Truth. Hugh's voice cracked. The truth is that you're bitter. The truth is that you're using me as a scapegoat for everything wrong with Hollywood. The truth is that you're being cruel for no reason other than to make yourself feel better. The studio fell silent again. Hugh's words hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. Whoopi's face went through a range of emotions, shock, anger, and something that might have been hurt. But she quickly masked it with more aggression. Bitter, she said quietly, her voice deadly calm. You think I'm bitter? Let me tell you something, Hugh Jackman. I've been in this business longer than you've been alive. I've won awards that you'll never even be nominated for. I've broken barriers that you'll never have to worry about, so don't you dare sit there and call me bitter. Hugh's composure finally snapped completely. Then. Act like it, he shouted, his voice echoing through the studio. Act like the accomplished professional you claim to be instead of attacking your guests for no reason. The words hit Whoopi like a slap across the face. For the first time since this nightmare began, she seemed genuinely taken aback, but her recovery was swift, and the venom in her response was unlike anything anyone had ever seen on daytime television. How dare you tell me how to act? She hissed, her voice low and dangerous. How dare you come into my house and lecture me about professionalism? You wouldn't last 5 minutes dealing with what I've had to deal with in this industry. Hugh's chest was heaving with emotion. Your house. This is supposed to be a talk show, not your personal therapy session. You don't get to work out your issues on your guests. My issues? Whoopi's voice rose to a shriek. My issues are with an industry that has systematically excluded people who look like me while elevating people who look like you. My issues are with actors who pretend to care about diversity while cashing checks from the most exclusive club in entertainment. The other hosts were now openly panicking. Joy Behar was frantically gesturing to the producers off camera. Sarah Haynes looked like she was about to cry. Alyssa Farah Griffin had given up entirely and was just staring at the spectacle unfolding in front of her. The audience was dead silent, but you could feel the electricity in the room. Everyone knew they were witnessing television history. Hugh's face was red with fury. You want to know what's really disgusting, Whoopi? It's watching someone with your platform, someone with your influence, use it to tear people down instead of building them up. You could have asked me about my foundation, about the schools I've helped build, about the scholarships I've funded. But no, you'd rather play the victim and make me the villain. Don't you dare turn this around on me, Whoopi screamed, pointing an accusatory finger at Hugh. Don't you dare make me the bad guy for asking uncomfortable questions. This is what's wrong with Hollywood. Nobody wants to have the real conversations. Hugh laughed bitterly. This isn't a conversation, Whoopi. This is an ambush. This is you using your position to attack someone who came here in good faith. You want to talk about abuse of power? Look in the mirror. The words seemed to hit Whoopi harder than anything else Hugh had said. Her face contorted with rage, and for a moment, it looked like she might actually strike him. Abuse of power. You think I'm abusing my power? You, the white man who's been handed everything on a silver platter, are accusing me of abusing power. I'm accusing you of being a bully, Hugh shouted back, his voice cracking with emotion. I'm accusing you of using this show to settle personal scores instead of entertaining your audience. I'm accusing you of being everything that's wrong with this industry." The studio erupted. The audience gasped collectively. Even the camera operators seemed shocked by the intensity of Hugh's words. Whoopi's mouth fell open in disbelief. She had pushed him to his absolute limit, and now she was seeing the result. "Everything that's wrong with this industry," she repeated, her voice shaking with rage. "I am everything that's wrong with this industry. Not the system that kept me out of roles for decades. Not the executives who told me I wasn't pretty enough, wasn't white enough, wasn't marketable enough. I'm the problem." Hugh's eyes were blazing now. "Right now in this moment. Yes, you are the problem. You're using past injustices to justify present cruelty. You're using your pain as a weapon to hurt innocent people. That's not activism, Whoopi. That's just revenge." The word revenge seemed to break something inside Whoopi. Her composure, which had been hanging by a thread, finally snapped completely. "Revenge? You think this is about revenge? This is about justice. This is about finally making people like you face the truth about what you've taken from people like me." "What have I taken from you?" Hugh demanded, his voice raw from shouting. "What have I personally taken from you? Have I ever competed with you for a role? Have I ever stood in your way? Have I ever done anything to hurt you personally? Because if not, then you're just using me as a punching bag for your own frustrations." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Whoopi opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time since this confrontation began, she seemed genuinely speechless. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Joy Behar made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Maybe we should all take a step back, she began. But Hugh cut her off. "No, Joy. I want to hear her answer. I want to know what I've personally done to deserve this treatment, because if she can't give me a real answer, then this entire display has been nothing but grandstanding and cruelty." Whoopi's face was a mask of fury and something else. Something that might have been shame. "You want to know what you've done?" she said quietly, her voice trembling. "You've existed in a world that was built for you while people like me had to fight for scraps. You've benefited from a system that was designed to exclude me. That's what you've done." Hugh shook his head in disbelief. "So, I'm guilty of being born. I'm guilty of working hard and achieving success. I'm guilty of playing a character that people loved. That's not a crime, Whoopi. That's just life. That's privilege," Whoopi shot back. "That's white privilege in action. The fact that you can't even see it proves my point." Hugh's voice dropped to a whisper, but it was more menacing than when he had been shouting. "You know what, Whoopi? I'm done. I'm done with this conversation. I'm done with your accusations, and I'm done with your show. You want to blame me for everything wrong with Hollywood? Fine, but I won't sit here and be your whipping boy." He started to remove his microphone, his hands shaking with rage. "You've turned what should have been a pleasant conversation into a nightmare. You've attacked my character, my career, and my integrity. And for what? To make yourself feel better? To prove some point to your audience?" Whoopi watched him with a mixture of satisfaction and uncertainty. "Where are you going, Hugh? Can't handle the heat." Hugh stopped and turned back to her, his eyes blazing with fury. "I can handle anything, Whoopi. What I can't handle is cruelty disguised as activism. What I can't handle is someone using their platform to tear people down instead of building them up. What I can't handle is sitting across from someone who's forgotten what it means to be human." The words hit like a physical blow. Whoopi actually stepped back, her face pale. The other hosts looked stunned. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Hugh's voice rose again, filled with all the frustration and anger that had been building throughout the interview. "You want to know what's really sad about this whole thing? I actually admire your work. I respect what you've accomplished. I understand the barriers you've broken. But right now, watching you tear me down for no reason other than your own bitterness, I'm disgusted. Not by your race, not by your gender, not by your politics. I'm disgusted by your character." Whoopi's face went through a range of emotions. Shock, hurt, and finally blazing anger. "My character? My character? You don't know anything about my character." "I know what I've seen today," Hugh replied, his voice steady despite his obvious emotion. "I've seen someone use their power to bully a guest. I've seen someone turn a talk show into a personal vendetta. I've seen someone forget that there's a human being sitting across from them." He finished removing his microphone and placed it carefully on the table. "I came here to talk about my work, my charity, my life. Instead, I've been subjected to one of the most unprofessional interviews of my career. And the saddest part is, you seem proud of it. Whoopi's voice was shaking now. Proud? You think I'm proud of this? You think I enjoy having to be the one to ask the hard questions? You think I like being the bad guy? Hugh looked at her with something that might have been pity. Then why do it, Whoopi? Why choose cruelty over kindness? Why choose attack over conversation? Why choose to be the person who tears others down instead of the person who builds them up? For a moment, just a moment, Whoopi's mask slipped. There was something vulnerable in her expression, something that suggested she might actually be questioning her own behavior. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by defiance. Because someone has to, she said quietly. Someone has to hold people accountable. Someone has to ask the uncomfortable questions. Someone has to speak for those who don't have a voice. Hugh shook his head sadly. Speaking for the voiceless doesn't require you to be voiceless yourself, Whoopi. It doesn't require you to abandon your humanity. It doesn't require you to become the thing you're fighting against. With that, he turned and walked toward the exit. The cameras followed him every step of the way, capturing the moment when one of Hollywood's most beloved figures finally reached his breaking point. As he reached the edge of the set, he turned back one last time. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion and disappointment. But I hope you don't destroy yourself in the process. And with that, Hugh Jackman walked off the view, leaving behind one of the most explosive moments in daytime television history. The studio remained silent for several long seconds before Joy Behar, her voice shaking, finally said, "We'll be right back after this commercial break." As the cameras cut away, you could see Whoopi standing alone at the table, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. She had gotten exactly what she seemed to want, a confrontation that would be talked about for years to come. But as she stood there in the silence of the studio, with the other hosts avoiding her gaze and the audience still stunned into silence, it was clear that her victory had come at a cost. What do you think about this explosive confrontation? Was Hugh justified in his reaction, or did he go too far? Let me know in the comments below.